A warm welcome to everyone. We have panelists and viewers in attendance from every habitable continent on Earth for this special event, Physical Activity and Wellness, the Body-Brain Foundation of Academic Achievement. It's hosted by the nonprofit NGO American Sports Institute. And I'm Joel Kirsch, president of the Institute, and I'll be the moderator for this webinar. After my opening comments to set the context for this webinar, we'll hear from our numerous panelists from around the world, and then I'll conclude with a summary of what the panelists have presented and closing comments. This presentation that is being recorded is as much a story as anything else. It's a true story, not a fairy tale. It's a true story about physical activity and wellness and what they have to do with evolution and genetics, neuroscience, bodily systems, especially physiology and metabolism, mental health and education, and the way in which all of these subject areas interrelate in the context of how school children everywhere, here in America and around the world, should be educated. But unfortunately, this is in direct contrast to how, for the most part, children are currently being educated in a manner, a physically inactive, sedentary manner, that figuratively and literally takes the children's very humanity from them, compromising their brain function and abilities, physical health, mental health and behavior, and ultimately their academic performance. Yes, this means that schools around the world, while certainly well-intentioned, are nevertheless operating on the wrong side of humanity. And while this story is going to be woven together by individual storytellers, international expert researchers and practitioners from these fields, once we're done, you'll see how the pieces of the story that each person tells help create a larger, coherent, and transformative educational paradigm and model that cultures and nations worldwide can embrace and implement today, right now, a paradigm and model that returns the children's humanity to them and produces kids who are smart, healthy, happy, and engaged. And this story is also about a school the American Sports Institute is creating that will be the most physically active and wellness-oriented school on the planet that will serve as a model for transforming school systems worldwide and be a resource and training center for educators everywhere. So with that, let's start telling our story. And where do you start a story? Of course, at the beginning. And for this, our first panelist is the perfect person to do so because our story begins some 2 million years ago in our evolutionary journey. And Professor Herman Pontzer is an evolutionary anthropologist at Duke University. Professor Pontzer, a few years ago, you wrote an article for Scientific American entitled, "Exercise is not optional, it is essential." What do you mean by this? How does exercise, physical activity impact both our brains and bodies? And just how much exercise or physical activity do we need to get each day to optimize its impact on our brains and bodies?
Thank you for that, Joel, and thanks. I'm so excited to be part of this and talk to you all this morning. You know, I'm a human biologist and evolutionary anthropologist, so my expertise is in how our bodies evolved and how that evolutionary past affects the way that they work today. And so I've been studying our evolution and working with in that field for about 2 decades now. As Joel mentioned, our genus, the genus Homo, is 2 million years old. It's 100,000 generations. And those 100,000 generations have been spent hunting and gathering until very, very recently. And that hunting and gathering lifestyle is a lifestyle in which our species evolved, both our genus and our species evolved. And so that's the context that we need to understand for understanding how our bodies work, because like any species, when we are in a lifestyle that matches the way that we evolved, we'll be healthier and happier, and our bodies will perform better. Hunting and gathering is a physically demanding lifestyle, as you can imagine. To make a living off of the wild animals and plants around you takes a lot of physical activity. I've had a chance to work with hunting and gathering communities that are still practicing that lifestyle today. And men and women are getting, 19,000 steps. Men get 19,000 steps a day, women about 13,000 steps a day. And that's the lifestyle that we're evolved to live in. So just like fish are adapted to water, we are adapted to be physically active. And we know that because when we move away from that active lifestyle, our hearts don't function as well. We have heart disease. Our brains don't function as well. We don't see as much cognitive development, and we don't stay as sharp. And so it's absolutely essential to maintain those high levels of activity because that's how we evolved. And so if we were to put some numbers on it, what we'd see is that about 15,000 steps a day is what's typical for our species. It's what we should all be doing. And that's equivalent of about 2 to 2.5 hours of constant movement a day. That's how our bodies evolved. That's what we're adapted to. And that's how we function best.
All right, Professor Ponser, thank you. Because this webinar is about how physical activity and wellness are the foundation of academic achievement, and we just heard how over 2 million years of our evolutionary journey, we've been genetically programmed to be physically active, not sedentary, and that physical activity not only positively impacts our body, it also enhances brain function. It's important to know just how physically active kids around the world are today. And so for this, we turn to Dr. Salomé Aubert of the Active Healthy Kids Global Alliance in France. Dr. Aubert, please tell us what the Global Alliance is about and what the latest data tell us about the physical activity levels of children and youth worldwide.
Hi, Joel, and hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for inviting me to be here and part of this event. So the Active Healthy Kids Global Alliance is a not-for-profit organization that want to act to help children and adolescents, all of them around the world, to get more active for their health. And so according to a very recent report of the Active Healthy Kids Global Alliance, comparing 57 countries from 6 continents, we found that children and adolescents are not moving enough to promote healthy growth and development, and that modern lifestyle that are associated with increased in digital screen time, associated with the growing urbanization of communities and the rise in automatization of tasks and the motorization of commute, are contributing to this public health issue. And even more, low-level physical activity seems to be exacerbated by the global pandemic, as well as by global conflict, climate change, and economic crisis. That being said, while overall the majority of children and adolescents are not moving enough to promote their current and future health, we observe that some countries are doing better in some specific areas than others, and that it could provide guidance on how to improve the situation. So I invite you to Google the Global Matrix 4 on physical activity for children and adolescents if you want to learn more about this initiative. And overall, the international experts who participated in this global report, they identified the following priorities to improve the situation globally. And the first one was to increase opportunities for being physically active at school, increasing the amount of physical activity education per week, making physical education a compulsory subject for all school levels. We also need to provide free access to public spaces, green spaces, playgrounds, sport facilities, and active transportation infrastructure, while addressing the issue of safety around the world and in the US. Developing physical activity policies that provide more equitable, accessible, inclusive, and attractive sports programs, specifically targeting the ones that are less accessible, that have more difficulty to access to physical activity opportunity, women, girls, children and adolescents with disabilities, children and adolescents from low-income families, etc. So again, I invite you to Google the Global Matrix 4 on physical activity for children and adolescents if you want to learn more. And thank you for your attention, and feel free to contact me if you have any question.
All right, Dr. Aubert, thank you. So the question then is, what would happen if kids everywhere were more physically active, just like Dr. Aubert was talking about what has to happen? How would this impact their academic performance? And so for this, we turn to Professor Charles Hillman at Northeastern University. He's a leading neuroscientist and expert on physical activity and its impact on cognition and academic performance. Professor Hillman, what do your studies tell us about the impact of physical activity on cognition and academic performance of students? And what would happen if more kids were physically active?
Thanks, Joel. It's good to be here this morning. Yeah, so for about the last 2 decades, a little more, my lab has focused on the effects of physical activity and being more fit, and on brain health, cognition, and in the case of children, academic performance. And I do a lot of this collaboratively with several of the members here today. And so if we were to step back and look at some of these areas, we know that more fit and more active children have greater structural integrity. That is, the architecture of their brain is better than that of less fit or active kids. We see this in both gray matter and white matter. From a brain function perspective, we know the brain operates better. So it's not just there's more integrity, but it functions better in the sense that it's the processes that underlie cognition and action are more efficient and effective. From a cognitive perspective, we note that children who are more fit and active, they have better executive functions. That means that they're better able to attend and inhibit information in their environment. They're better able to hold items in their memory and use them when necessary, and they're better at multitasking. And this all underlies improvements in academic performance. That is to say that more fit and active children are related to better performance in schools. Having said that, we think about this 2 different ways. We think about this both in terms of a chronic lifestyle, that is a daily participation in physical activity. And we think about this acutely. That is to say that we have paradigms that we've been using for more than 15 years that show that single doses of physical activity benefit brain function, cognition, and academic performance in school-age children for a period of time, for about an hour or so afterwards. And so these findings have led to the 2018 Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans to make recommendations around brain health as a function of being more physically active.
All right, Professor Hillman, thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Joel.
So with what we've just heard from Professor Ponser, Dr. Aubert, and Professor Hillman, let's now bounce around the planet to see if this phenomenon of physical activity positively impacting brain function, how extensive it is, especially in school children, and if it's something that shows up in only isolated examples or is beginning to emerge globally, albeit on a very small scale to date. And one country that has begun to take this research to heart is Finland. And in particular, Professor Arja Sakslahti of the University of Jyväskylä is someone who both conducts research on the impact of physical activity on brain function, and then uses this research to train elementary level teachers how to apply it to the classroom. So Professor Sakslahti, what does your research say, and how do you actually apply physical activity in the academic environment when you're training elementary school teachers?
Okay, hello, thank you, Joe, for nice words, and hello, everyone. So we have measured children's physical activity by accelerometers, and those are devices that gives us information about total amount of children's physical activity, as well as information about physical activity intensity levels. And the most recent methods allows us also to measure the amount of sitting, and these are those main issues here. And all this information is combined with the data about children's performance in academic learning outcomes like reading skills, numeracy, mathematics skills, as well as the grades of different school subjects. So physical activity is also combined with more specific items, such as executive functions, just like Professor Charles Hillman described earlier. And we even have more specifically found that memory and inhibition are those interesting items here. So the data and research results have shown that those children who are physically active have better learning outcomes than other children. And from my perspective, I'm interested very early, young children, so this is relevant already before school age. So concretely, all this means that they have more moderate to vigorous physical activity than other children. And interestingly, the most recent results from our longitudinal study with the University of Helsinki shows that those 3 to 5 year old children who have better fundamental motor skills have also better executive functions. So physical activity and moving is associated with children's cognition at the very early age. And this kind of information is important also to teachers. So it's teachers' duty to support children's development and learning. And therefore, as a part of teacher education, we motivate them by scientific information showing the role of physical activity and movement to pupils' well-being, but also learning. And the theory is good to know, but teachers need practical models for how to do, what to do, and when to do. And the earlier research has shown that the most effective things are playing outdoors, having good quality physical education lessons, having activity breaks during classroom lessons, and walking or biking to school. And for example, here in Finland, preschool children play outdoors every day 1 to 2 hours daily, really daily, every day, even it's raining or snowing or it's freezing weather. And primary school pupils have 60 minutes lessons. They have 45 minutes academic lessons, and then they go out for 15 minutes to play. And nowadays, more and more teachers also use activity breaks after 20-25 minutes, because teachers have realized that it's typical that children are able to concentrate approximately 20 minutes. And after activity break, they are able to continue intensive studying. So we trust quality. And in secondary schools, the lessons may be longer than 60 minutes, but teachers use more learning by doing teaching methods together with these activity breaks.
Okay, Professor Sakslahti, thank you very, very much. I know you're doing a lot of great work there at the University of Jyväskylä. Okay, Professor Katarina Pesky is at the University of Rome, and she's done a lot of research regarding physical activity and its impact on cognition, and also as this relates to school children. So Professor Pesky, what does your research say regarding the impact of physical activity on brain function, especially regarding school children?
Yes, I connect with Aria, speaking about the connection of motor competence, brain functions, and holistic development. Because what I have found with my research is that not every type of physical activity is similarly effective to promote cognitive, emotional, social development. So I think we should consider the qualitative components of physical activity, not only the quantitative components, which are crucial to capitalize on movement to foster holistic development. So we have to understand the relationship between motor task complexity, motor learning, motor competence, and how physical activity can act as an enrichment on the interconnected development of the brain in its motor, cognitive, emotional, and social function. For this reason, I welcome so much this meeting because I think the worst case is siloed thinking. This is wrong in our case, because if we want to tap really the role of motor, physical activity and motor competence in holistic development, how they are developing in an interconnected way. So we need really scientists who move from evolutionary neuroscience in translational research until the translational research, because we must be able to walk along this bridge, which brings to put not only more evidence into policy, but also more policy into evidence. That is, we scientists have the responsibility to follow the major needs of more physical activity, more healthy, physically and mentally healthy children, and then to perform non-siloed research. So to gain better understanding, which can be transitioned into practice. This is my way of thinking. Thank you.
All right, Professor Pesky, thank you very much. So now what we're going to do is we're going to jump all the way over to Australia. Professor David Lubens of the University of Newcastle in Australia, you also both conduct research on the impact of physical activity on the brain, but what you do that's so interesting to me is that you also take this research and develop programs that get implemented in the Australian school system. Would you tell us about your research and about the programs that you've implemented?
Thanks, Joel, and welcome everyone, and for this opportunity to have a discussion this morning. Yeah, you're right, Joel. One of my big focus of my research is taking physical activity and interventions that work and then putting them into schools and testing them, starting small and then leading up into really large-scale projects that can have a really big effect. And really, this interaction and this effect of physical activity on cognition and academic performance is really what led me to work with Chuck Hillman, because he was really leading work in that space. And so what we found is that's such a driver for schools and teachers to implement programs. And we work from really complex whole of school interventions that attempt to change every aspect of the school, from the quality of physical activity in physical education, what's happening at recess and lunchtime. So really comprehensive interventions, as well as really simple interventions like activity breaks in the classroom. And what we found is that teachers are really motivated to implement interventions that are known or demonstrate improvements for students' academic related outcomes. And probably one of our most recent studies has been targeting the kind of the final years of high school. It's called Burn to Learn. And this is a particularly interesting intervention because most schools in Australia and around the world do not provide mandatory activity for students in those final years. And so we've shown that by the integration of 2 or 3, 10-15 minute activity breaks of high intensity, we see these really powerful improvements in student outcomes. And some of these improvements are at the acute level and relating very much to academic outcomes. We've shown that once students have an active break, they are far more on task, far more concentrating more effectively in the classroom. Now, this is a finding that's been replicated in dozens of studies in primary schools. We were the first to show this in older adolescents in those final years of school. But we've also seen some really powerful benefits in terms of their longer term outcomes, in terms of their physical fitness and also their behavior. So also their mental health outcomes, particularly in relation to stress and internalizing disorders. So yeah, I guess I'm really interested in taking things that seem to work and making a real difference in schools. And so it's not just about 1 or 2 small studies. It's about trying to make a difference across the population of Australian children. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Sure, thank you. Listen, you're doing great work. Really appreciate it. All right, so let's now go back over to Europe at the University of Castilla-La Mancha in Spain, and we have Professor Celia Alvarez Bueno. Please tell us about your research regarding physical activity and its impact on the brain and cognition.
Hi to everyone. It's a pleasure for me to share with you this webinar. Sorry, and Joel, I will to thank you this opportunity. So, as you have said, my group and we are focused on the research of the effects of physical exercise, not only on cognitive function, but also on cardiovascular health across the lifespan. It's not only for children, especially in children, because we are developing research since 20 years ago, conducting clinical trials in schools, offering physical activity programs designed with different aims. We offer these programs as after-school activities or as an integrated physical activity program in the classroom for children from 3 years old to 12, so with a wide range of age. Each trial is developed through the school year, so we have that data from 9 months of duration for each trial. So with the research, we have been able to observe that only of the options that we have developed in the schools can improve cognitive functions such inhibition or cognitive life skills. These improvements have also impact on the academic performance in the school children from very young age. So we have also seen that these physical activity programs improve cardiovascular parameters such as blood pressure, body mass index, or quality of life, including quality of life also, that we have been able to relate or to associate with children's academic performance and cognitive function. So not only physical activity itself benefit cognitive function, but also through other parameters that we can observe in children. So one of the main points I would like to share some observations that the researchers have explained now, that this physical activity we have observed that has better benefits when it is promoted as a non-competitive physical activity program. And also when we modify the playground in the school and make it equally accessible for girls and boys. And also when we consider other aspects as the meaning of the movement that we are asking the children to do. So this is our point and our experience. And also the benefits can be observed in the 3 designs that we have implemented in the schools that has been including breaks in teaching, also increasing time of physical activity, even if it means reducing time in other subjects like maths or reading, and also using physical activity as an extracurricular activity. So the 3 of them can get benefits for children. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Alvarez Bueno. All right, let's return to Italy and Dr. Tal Doten Ben-Susan at the Pauletti Foundation for Development and Communication. And she conducts other kinds of research regarding the positive impact of physical activity on the brain. Dr. Doten Ben-Susan, please tell us about your research.
Thank you, Joel. So the last 20 years, I've dedicated mostly to training-induced neuroplasticity research. In our Research Institute for Neuroscience, Education and Didactics of the Pauletti Foundation, focusing mostly on the quadrato motor training, which is a sensory motor movement meditation conducted within a 50 by 50 centimeter square. We conduct these different experiments both in lab settings, mostly using EEG, and also field work in schools using molecular measures. So the quadrato motor training was found to increase creativity, reflectivity, spatial cognition, and information processing. And it was also found to improve reading in dyslexic participants. We look at neuroplasticity in many levels, but I will focus mostly on the electrophysiological level. And these changes that we found cognitively were correlated electrophysiologically, especially with increased alpha activity, which in turn we know is related also to emotional well-being. which is an increasingly important theme these days, especially following the COVID pandemic. This is another thing I would like to contribute to this beautiful conversation we're having. So looking at children's development as a harmonic triangle of body, movement, cognition, and emotion. Speaking about the COVID pandemic, I would also like to mention that recently we also found that the Quadrato reduced pro-inflammatory cytokines. This work is still in progress. And this was relative to a passive control group, demonstrating for the first time the Quadrato effects also on the immune system. We're currently expanding this line of research, especially in schools, comparing sitting and movement meditations and different kinds of movement. I would like to add just an additional component to this discussion about the importance of differentiating between automatic movement and intentional voluntary movement, such as the Quadrato motor training, which requires second by second choice reaction. And we saw, in fact, differences also within movement meditations between this practice and Aikido. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So now let's go back to the US, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and Professor Neha Gote, who is conducting interesting research on different types of physical activity and how they positively impact the brain. Professor Gote, would you describe what you're focusing on and what your research is about and the results to date?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So my name is Neha Gote. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology and Community Health here at Illinois. And my interest over the past decade has really stemmed from examining more closely movement that is not just physical movement, but also perhaps mindful movement. So my research specifically is examining yoga, which is an ancient Indian practice. It involves three different components, really. It has a movement element to the practice. There is some breathing exercises, and also there is some meditative or mindfulness-based activities that are really holistic to the practice of yoga. And so my research has tried to examine how does this holistic form of movement, the mind-body form of movement, really impacts the brain. We have conducted studies with college-age students, with middle-aged and older adults. And at this time, we are amidst the first randomized clinical trial comparing yoga with more traditional forms of exercise, such as aerobic exercise and strength training or weight training. So we are really trying to uncover whether yoga can bring something more to the table when it comes to neurocognitive benefits, as well as some of those imaging-based outcomes. Our preliminary studies show that there is promise. A lot of the benefits from yoga practice mirror the benefits that we see with aerobic exercise in terms of the regions of the brain and behavioral functions of the brain, such as memory, executive functioning, attention, and processing speed. So we are really looking forward to some of our data from the clinical trial in the coming years.
All right, Professor Gote, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, over to California. The University of California at Los Angeles, better known as UCLA, is Professor Fernando Gomez-Pinilla, who conducts research on how both physical activity and diet not only enhance brain functions, but also how they impact wellness, especially as this relates to major chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and dementia. Professor Gomez-Pinilla, just how do physical activity and diet impact both our brain and body? And what do physical activity and diet have to do with chronic diseases? And I cleared this with you earlier, if you will, regarding chronic diseases. You told us that a few months ago, you talked about when we spoke with you a few months ago, you talked about your wife who died of cancer. So would you tell us about the support group she was in, and based on your research, what the two of you did differently and how this impacted her longevity?
Okay, Thank you very much, all. And it's amazing to be here and listening to this wonderful panel. And I have to tell you that we started working on exercise like 25 years ago. And it's amazing these days, isn't it, that everyone is talking about all of these different aspects of exercise, cognitive function, and those days people had a lot of problem to believe that exercise could affect the brain, because they thought that the exercise was mostly muscle activity and that type of things. So in these terms, for us, it was very important to focus on the molecular mechanism of exercise. And actually it was quite interesting to find that exercise was affecting molecular mechanisms directly related to most of the aspects that you people have been talking here, like cognitive function, learning and memory, and one of the most important components that is common practically to all that you have been discussing here is synaptic plasticity, which is one of the central mechanisms for cognition, depression, and everything that have been talking here. So and also was extremely important in terms of these molecular mechanisms to find that these molecules like BDNF and downstream molecules important for the synaptic plasticity, CREV, and many others, isn't it? They are affected by the amount of exercise, proportionally to the amount of exercise. So the more exercise, actually there were more of these molecules in the brain. And also another important aspect of this was epigenetics, isn't it? As you know, epigenetic these days is a very important terminology trying to explain, isn't it, how all of these molecular changes can affect for a long time, isn't it, can be saved for years, even across generations. So anyway, so all of these effects have been extremely important to explain a lot of what you have been talking about here. And the other important aspect, what Joel was talking about, this interaction between exercise and diet, because it was amazing to discover that a lot of these molecular mechanisms that I mentioned about exercise are affected by diet, like poor diets, like diets high in sugar or saturated fat, were reducing a lot of this mechanism while exercise was counteracting this. So then we came up with the concept that the two things, isn't it, like instead of just talking about exercise per se, it's important to think about the whole package, isn't it? It's not just exercise, there are many other modalities that work together in order to express some final outcome of this. So in terms of this, it was extremely interesting, and also, as Joel mentioned, unfortunately, I mean, I have to deal with a lot of the things because more than 10 years ago, my wife was diagnosed of cancer, stage 4, which is one of the worst stages, and I had to deal on this for many years, and there was, I mean, and certainly since I was working on this, I mean, it's a sort of challenge, try to put in practice all the knowledge that we might have about this, and in something that you have in your home, isn't it? So so my wife was always practicing physical activity and diet. She believed very much on all of this. And one thing that what I learned, and that was extremely striking, that she was put in a group of 10 other people with under similar disease circumstances, and it was amazing to discover that all the people died in the first year. I mean, after diagnosis of the cancer. And for this, isn't it, we may connect with all of what you people have been talking about here, depression and everything. And in the reality, one important component for cancer that certainly you had the disease per se, but a lot of the people died because of the depression and died also because they don't eat or eat the wrong things. And indeed, the therapists at the moment, they are not very much concerned about the diet. So in terms of that, my wife actually stayed healthy for more than 10 years. And so what I did was to design, isn't it, ways for her to eat the right things. And also, since they have a lot of problems with the digestive system, so what I did was to put a lot of these in a smoothie way, so something that she could drink easily. And it works for a long time, isn't it? And we were able actually to keep the cancer in a sort of low stage. But anyway, she lasted more than 10 years under these circumstances. And so anyway, I was happy to do this. And I think this can be done with other patients, isn't it, that of cancer. But as I said, a lot of these people die because they don't eat. I mean, they have problem in nutrition, and that start a vicious circle, depression and everything that you can imagine. Anyway, that's my story. Thank you.
All right, Professor Gomez-Pinilla, thank you for sharing that. That was special. Someone else who's doing cutting-edge research on the impact of physical activity on not only chronic diseases, but communicable diseases as well, is Professor Zen Yan at Virginia Tech. And Professor Yan is the founding director of a new center at Virginia Tech that focuses on, and I love this expression, exercise as medicine, just like Professor Gomez-Pinilla was talking about. So Professor Yan, would you please talk about the exercise as medicine research that you do, especially in the context of the impact of exercise on both chronic and communicable diseases, including COVID?
Well, thank you, Joe. You made this planet smaller. Thank you very much. And since ancient time, we humans know that physical activity or regular exercise is the way of living and is the way of maintaining health. However, the modernization has led to the inactivity, which we argue is a disease for our children, even more so. So as an inaugural director, I started my research 20 years ago at Duke University, and I got my training from University of Illinois. That's why I mentioned that you made the planet smaller. And ever since then, we used the various models from ranging from yeast to cells to animals and to humans. And our mission is to understand the fundamental molecular mechanism of the benefit of exercise, why exercise is so good in promoting health and promoting the lifespan, more importantly, their health span. And so our studies has led to many findings. I would like to give you a few examples. Exercise improve the quality of mitochondria, which is the power plants of all cells that are dependent on for cellular function. Exercise in pregnancy can even prevent or mitigate the negative impact of the parents. including the father. And so through chemical modification of genes called epigenetics. The last one I would like to mention is, exercise can promote the expression of an antioxidant called ECSOD, or superoxide dismutase that's secreted by the skeletal muscle into the circulation, can travel to different organs, including the lung, kidney, heart, to protect the heart from diabetic cardiomyopathy, from the kidney, from kidney failure. Recently, we have discovered ECSOD can station in the lung and to prevent ARDS, which is the disease condition that requires ventilation for like a COVID. So I think our research argue that, reassure that physical activity is the most powerful intervention for promoting health, prevent disease. But on the other hand, I would argue we know so little, and there is so much more than we can ever imagine. That's why more research is needed to understand the fundamental, the superb benefits of physical activity on health. Thank you.
All right, Professor Yan, thank you. It's really interesting because there's another dimension related to the positive impact of physical activity on students, especially teenagers. And this has to do with mental illness, and in particular, anxiety and depression, which is reaching epidemic proportions both here in America and other countries. And Dr. Maria Åberg of the University of Gothenburg in Sweden has conducted research regarding this issue. Dr. Åberg, would you please tell us about the research on the positive impact of physical activity as both a form of prevention and treatment for anxiety and depression in teenagers?
Yes, thank you. Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. First, I want to tell that I'm a GP and also associate professor, and I have commenced several clinical and epidemiological projects stemming from previous preclinical research questions. So especially regarding neurogenesis and neuroprotective aspects of cardiovascular fitness. So actually I went from animal research to family medicine and human RCTs. Okay, so as already mentioned by Fernando Gomez Pinilla, exercise affects brain plasticity. Numerous studies support that aerobic fitness training in particular, but also resistance exercise, both have positive effects of brain function and cognition throughout the lifespan. So for school children and adolescents, it appears that specific type of training matters. That specific type matters. So it seems that complex motor training is better than a simple cardiovascular training. And group sports with their social interactions also increase mental health in both children and adolescents. So first, regarding the prevention of anxiety and depression, findings from observational studies suggest that promoting physical activity and decreasing sedentary behavior might protect mental health in both children and adolescents. And secondly, regarding treatment of anxiety and depression in children, physical activity has potentially beneficial effects for reduced anxiety and depression, but the evidence base is limited. Intervention designs are often low in quality, and many reviews include cross-sectional studies. So physical activity can lead to improvements in self-esteem, at least in the short term. However, findings from recent meta-analysis suggest that physical activity interventions have most of their effects in promoting and improving adolescent mental health. I also would like to add that in my research group, we have been able to investigate the importance of a large set of risk factors during adolescence for the development of chronic disorders later in life. So we have shown that the risk of depression anxiety, suicide, epilepsy, and early dementia, also early stroke, increase with poor physical fitness at 18 years of age. Additionally, mental illness in adolescence associates with the risk of early stroke, heart failure, marginalization, and premature mortality. So therefore, it is really important to prevent this with physical exercise already during adolescence. So in conclusion, physical activity reduces the risk of anxiety, depression in children and teenagers, but the effects seem most pronounced for teenagers. And the reasons for this may have to do with brain development. Younger children may be more physically active compared to teenagers. At least in Sweden, anxiety and depression disorder are more common in adolescence. So with that, I would like to conclude. Thank you for your attention.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Albert. So far we've heard that research shows and programs demonstrate that physical activity has a positive impact on the brain, on cognition. It has a positive impact. We've known this for a while about regarding our health. It has a positive impact, as we just heard, on our mental health, especially regarding teenagers and anxiety and depression. There's also a growing amount of research showing the same thing with the arts, especially music. And Professor Julian Johnson of the University of California at San Francisco has conducted research studies and developed programs in this area. So Professor Johnson, just what does the research show regarding the impact of music on the brain, and how does this relate to the academic performance of students?
Thank you so much, Joel, and it's great to see so many wonderful faces from across the world. Really exciting panel, and I'm learning a lot, so thank you for inviting me. So from an early age, children are remarkably responsive to music, and infants begin engaging with sound at birth, as we all know, and this contributes significantly to the development of language, hearing, social, emotional, and motor systems. A growing body of evidence suggests that music training has the capacity to foster the development of both music skills and non-musical skills across multiple domains, including language, attention, visual spatial perception, and executive function, which we've heard a lot about today as related to sports and movement and physical activity. Engaging in music is also important for emotional development, as we just heard. Engaging in music learning can help young people learn empathy and how to regulate their emotions, such as managing feelings of stress, anxiety, or depression, which we just heard about. And music has strong links to the brain's reward systems and can be a motivator of positive emotions too. And we think this is why it's important to not only think about physical activity, but also the arts as it relates to the development of children and their brains. We know that the brain responds selectively to music and is important across the life course. For example, the auditory cortex in the temporal lobes here on the sides of your brain is especially responsive to music. And this suggests that music is special to our brains, but there are also areas of the brain that respond to both music and language and other functions. So there are overlapping brain circuits between those that respond to music and other parts of our lives. So it's not surprising that taking music lessons as a child can have an impact on non-musical skills that are important to education. For example, one study found that children who took 2 years of music training had improved speech processing skills in the brain, which also strengthened literacy and listening skills in school. And the students who practiced more frequently made greater gains. This suggests that there's a dose-dependent benefit of music training to the brain. Early musical training also confers long-term health benefits. For example, older adults who took at least 10 years of music lessons when they were young had better hearing skills than those older adults who didn't take any music lessons. And this suggests that music training in early life makes lifelong changes to the brain and sensory systems. Thus, making music changes the brain with biological impacts on listening, language, learning, social connection, and cognition. And our hope is that the research findings catalyze educators and legislators to promote and support music training programs for the health and well-being of our children. Thank you very much.
All right, Professor Johnson, thank you. Thank you so much. One of the big issues in education today has to do with, in tying all this together, has to do with disengagement that students experience in school. And the higher the level of school, from elementary to middle school to high school, the greater the disengagement. And the words that the students, high school students, use most often, the three words they use most often to describe their experience in their academic courses is tired, stressed, and bored. And this is from an overwhelming majority of students. Professor David Chernoff at Rutgers University has conducted studies and written articles and books addressing this issue, especially in the context of what is called flow theory. So Professor Chernoff, would you please describe what flow theory is, what it has to do with student engagement, and what physical activity has to do with all of this?
Thank you, Joel, and thanks for having me today. Sure, yeah, I can start by saying a little bit about what flow is. Flow is a psychological state of complete concentration and absorption in an activity of interest to the point where there's no room left for distraction or self-consciousness. And this typically comes about when someone is engaged in an activity that's at a high level of challenge, and they use a high level of skill to meet that challenge. Flow has been called optimal experience, and it's been linked to a number of positive outcomes for youth, such as talent development, well-being, and academic engagement and achievement. Unfortunately, my research and that of others has shown that there's not a lot of flow going on in traditional public schools. In fact, as you alluded, national and international studies have found that over 25% of students are disengaged, and upward of 40 to 60% have been characterized as chronically disengaged, meaning not just sometimes, but that's their overall disposition to schooling, and that includes high and low achievers alike. The reason for the pervasive disengagement, according to national surveys, is that schoolwork is not perceived as interesting or relevant. Students don't feel to be part of a community. They don't feel that their teachers are valuing their work. Sports and athletics, on the other hand, are quintessential flow activities because the conditions for flow are frequently met. So, for example, the level of challenge is often optimized to student skills, and as the challenge increases, students get better and better. Also, the goals are often clear, and players receive immediate feedback as to, performance feedback as to meeting those goals. So overall, students are optimally engaged and motivated when challenged in skill building and relevant activities, and they're supported to meet those challenges. And unlike traditional schooling, that dynamic is fairly ubiquitous in sports and athletics and physical activities. And that's why they are really a gold standard in some ways for peak engagement, motivation, and flow.
All right, Dr. Chernoff, thank you so much. So a real world example of physical activity positively impacting the academic performance of students is one of the American Sports Institute's pilot projects called PASS, Promoting Achievement in School Through Sport. And PASS is a year-long academic course for middle and high school students where they study what are called the FAMs, F-A-M, and then lowercase s, meaning fundamentals of athletic mastery, the elements that make athletes successful. And then the students apply these FAMs to a year-long project that has two goals. One goal is to improve their physical performance in some way, and the other goal is to improve their overall academic performance. The PASS program has been presented to 4,000 students in 59 secondary schools in 5 states, mostly California and Illinois, with 1 school each in Oregon, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And researchers at a division of the U.S. Department of Education evaluated the PASS program and called it, and I'm quoting here, a model for total school reform that addresses the needs of the whole learner, intellectual needs, motivational needs, and other needs such as students' physical and social needs. It engages the students by its holistic approach, and in turn, their achievement is enhanced. And here in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, one of our students from the early 1990s is Eddie Alvarado, who's now an engineer at NBC Sports Bay Area. He was in the PASS program at McAteer High School. Eddie, if you would, what was your experience like in the PASS program all those years ago, and what did you get out of it?
Thanks, Joel, and thanks to the whole panel for being here, for participating. Yes, like you mentioned, I was in the PASS program back in 1992, I just remembered, at McAteer High School in San Francisco. It's a public school. We learned all the fundamental elements there, as you mentioned, the PAMs that made us successful in sports. And also we learned there, not only that we had them in us by participating in sports or physical activity, but by also how we could apply those to our everyday lives, both academically, at home, etc. I will point out that we were a very diverse group of student athletes from all kinds of backgrounds. We represented virtually every team sport that there was available at the school. Some of us even were recent immigrants, and yet we all integrated well within the class. We all participated in the activities and were engaged. We're all very excited to participate, to be there every day for the whole year that the program lasted. So I guess you can say that although it seemed like we had very little in common with some of the other students, basically all of us had that common bond that was sports, and also being physically active and being part of the class. What we did in the classroom is we did some exercises integrating these FAMs, for instance, balance exercises, concentration practices. We also discussed what these FAMs really meant to us, not only on the pitch, on the gridiron, on the court, etc. We also discussed how these were also good for us, just basically in what we experience every day in our everyday lives outside of school and outside of the of sports, as well as setting goals in not only what we wanted to achieve through sports, but also what our curriculum, some of us had the goals of getting higher GPAs, even just basically graduating was a goal that we all were trying individually to achieve, but also supporting each other as a group. I want to say that in the end, this class actually helped us not only strengthen some of our friendships, but also created new ones through all the activities that we were able to participate in, both in the classroom and also some other activities outside. Once I graduated, I took all this with me, all this knowledge, and basically tried to apply it in everyday life, with at home with my parents first, and then once I got a family, also try to continue this with this knowledge. Sometimes you don't succeed, but even that basically is a learning experience for you. It took a few years longer to graduate from college, but I feel like if I didn't have the experience and the support that I did from Joel, from my classmates, probably I wouldn't have been able to complete my my education, but thankfully I did. And once again, you have ups and downs. Can't say that you've been successful all the time, but in terms of how I felt when I was physically fit and when I wasn't, as you know, with the family, sometimes you, and with life, work, sometimes you're not able to do much physical exercise, much physical activity. I will say that the times when you're fit is when you feel the best, and there's no room for depression, there's no room for feeling down. Personally, I feel this class helped me a lot. I took this knowledge. I've developed a great friendship with Joel. And lastly, I will conclude that this was also very a generational knowledge, generational experience for me, because I also tried to pass it along to my daughter when she was trying to integrate herself into the baseball team. Try to discuss with her what I learned here in this class, and that actually greatly improved her outlook on sports, and also made her more open to be friendly with everyone else in her team. And it just was great. And when we were sending her to school, I even tried to write a whole essay for her, just outlining the 8 fundamentals of athletic mastery. Never know whether she read them or not, but at least we made the effort. And I will have to say that I'm happy to report that she's graduated college, and I strongly feel that it is in great part thanks to what I learned in this class and what I was able to pass along. And in general, nowadays I try to apply all these and just spread it out.
Well, we lost you there, Eddie. Your sound. All right. Okay. Thank you, Eddie. Shannon McGuire Mulholland, who works with international development and humanitarian aid agencies, including the UN, was in the PASS program at Tamalpais High School, just north of San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. Shannon, what do you recall about the PASS program, and how did it impact you?
Thanks, Joel. PASS is one of the few classes I can remember in detail from high school. And don't get me wrong, I remember a lot of my classes. I can tell you what thin film interference is, thanks to physics, but that didn't really give me much to move on with. I don't work in the sciences. I have a strong breadth of classic literature thanks to English, but PASS taught me life skills, really fundamental things that I've taken with me through my life. It showed me both that classes that many other classes were about strict academics, and this taught me about balance both physically, emotionally, and mentally. We went through exercises on thought, on centering your body, on centering your breathing, and really about how movement is so much more important than just for your muscles, but your brain. And those life skills I've taken with me professionally. I work in international development and humanitarian aid. I've been to many countries that my family would prefer me not to be. I was working in Pakistan about 15 years ago on the Afghani border, and we were in lockdown. We had to be for safety and security. As an unwed young American woman, I was not culturally appropriate to be where I was working. So every single day after the office, I was in a team house and was not allowed to leave. I started getting depressed. But going back to understanding the importance of movement, I started my own exercise regime. Just me in my room in my little itty bitty compound. There was 2 other colleagues there, and we started making sure that movement was part of our day. In Haiti, I managed an IDP camp, and I was dealing with severely affected families who lost everything. The stress was enormous, but being able to understand how to control my own mental health through breathing, literally just remembering the breathing exercises I had. I even do it today in my office in New York when dealing with really sensitive political issues or personality management. It's amazing how some of these, what one could consider simple tasks or exercises can make stress leave my day. But I'm also here because I'm a parent. I'm a parent of 3 kids, and I have a son who is considered neurodiverse. He has no learning disabilities, yet he is now going through his second neuropsych in his school life. He's in 5th grade, so what is he, 10? And he was determined in 1st grade to have something wrong with him. He's in a public school in New York City, a school I love, but something was wrong. So we started looking. And that something is because he only has 1 recess a day. We have learned that he fidgets, not because he's bored, but because he is physically unable to sit on his hands as a 10-year-old in a lecture series at school. So we started protecting his after school time to make sure he got all the movement he needed and put him on a bike before school every single day. We have to force him into that physical exercise that he wants so badly before and after school, just to keep him balanced. And unfortunately, because we are unable to ensure that he's going to be able to get this kind of movement and value of sports and physical activity, and I mean real physical activity, I don't mean walking down a hallway, we're moving schools. We're putting him into a school with a curriculum that values movement and understands learning and intelligence is linked to kinetics. And it saddens me, as I love the public school system here in New York City. My other 2 kids do fine, but I don't necessarily believe he's neurodiverse. I believe he just needs to move like most of us.
All right, Shannon, thank you, and our best to your son. Okay, Jen Leverance. She's now a school psychologist at Twin Groves Middle School in Northern Illinois. And she was in the PASS program, but at Antioch Community High School in Illinois, not California. Jen, as you look back now, what was your experience like in the PASS program?
Thanks, Joel. I'm really excited to be able to share my experience. I was a student in the PASS classroom for 3 years. I had the opportunity to kind of serve as a student leader for the last 2 of those years. I will say I went into the PASS program already a high achieving student and a 3-sport athlete. And so my growth through PASS was more through the mental health lens and learning the power of integrating what I was already naturally inclined towards striving all the time, how to integrate that with some more balance. So I would say that through all of the fundamentals that I learned through PASS and the real focus on discipline and respect for others and for yourself through that family feel in the classroom, I really developed a self-assurance and skills to lead others through my words and actions that I just didn't have before. I was kind of a worker bee who was very good at school, and I saw sports as a way to, be involved and be with friends, but I didn't understand just how that physical activity was impacting my mental health and my ability to do all of those executive functions that so many of the panelists have talked about, between time management and planning and organizing. As I went through the PASS program and started to really mindfully learn about the body-brain connection, I started to understand myself more, and I was better able to really mindfully harness the benefits of my physical activities to better serve my mental health and keep me on top of my academic goals as I got closer to graduation, and the stress layers about college were on the rise. So really the value of learning, I'll never forget the 10-minute concentration practice and how difficult it was for me to just sit still, not cheat and open my eyes, but really maintain calm breathing and just focusing on nothingness for that 10 minutes, despite my teacher doing all the things to try to distract us. I'll never forget that. And that's something that I still come back to, that and the breathing exercises that we learned when I am facing stressors in my day. I feel like PASS really taught me patience with myself and with others, and really reinforced the power of positivity and enthusiasm. And because we did so much work on goal setting and really coming back to reflect on our goals. I learned how to do the problem solving process very effectively, which I now use in my work as a school psychologist, working with families and with teaching teams and with students. I feel like I learned to be open to feedback and to really focus on self-reflection, which now by my employers. So I feel like it's really shaped me as a human, which now benefits me and my relationships both at work, but also as a parent and a spouse. Like some of the other panelists have said, I definitely bring what I've learned through past to my parenting and try to instill these same values in my children, because I just see the power of that mindfulness and physical activity in my life, and I want them to have that as well. In my work as a school psychologist, I'm working with adolescents, and I was speaking with Joel the other week about how I'm really noticing.
Whoop, we're losing your connection, Jen.
I'm sorry, can you still hear me?
It's going in and out.
Okay, I'm going to try my best here. The students who have better balance with physical activity and that self-discipline in my school do seem to have much more stable mental health, better ability to continue to be on that track for high achievement. It seems that the students who come down more for mental health challenges are really losing that balance. There's a lot more reliance on screens and social media in this age than there was even when I was younger. So I do see the power of, how this can impact positively, and then how the lack of physical activity or lack of that mindfulness training can really negatively impact students as well.
All right. Thank you, Jen. So we've just heard from 3 students. Actually, Jen's teacher in the past program at Antioch was Mark Ring, who's about to retire from teaching from Lakes Community High School, also in Northern Illinois. Mark, if you would, quickly, what was it like teaching the past program? How did it impact you and your perspective on how kids learn, and your role also as an administrator?
Well, I think it made the students look a little bit more intrinsic and maybe take their education a little bit more selfish, taking care of themselves. As a past instructor, I was a coach, I was a teacher, a counselor, I was an advocate for them in different facets, trying to help their goals, help them achieve and be successful. And I think they're able to take that in life. And I think the 3 students that we heard from, I was able to gain a lot of that myself. It brought me a presence, it brought me a security of the breathing, and just knowing who I am and what I'm all about, what life's all about. That foundation of the mind, body, and spirit is so important. We lose that, that Arete, constant striving for excellence and a balanced and unified mind, body, and spirit. It's key. And I was able to take that from where I was as an instructor to where, as an administrator, I even like to write some of my evaluations utilizing some of the FAMs that we have, making sure the teacher has their power. Are they relaxed? Things that I think are important. The fundamentals of athletic mastery are indeed, I think, important for all of us, because, we see that. I see that in the PE classes. I'm also the department chair for PE, driver, and health. And it's crucial that every day our kids are active. We have a shadowing that our faculty do every semester. We have 3 or 4 of our faculty shadow some of our students. And at the end of each of the days, they come in and they talk to the administration. And every single one of them always come in and say, it's tough. It really is tough to be a student. Why is it? Because we're sitting all day long. We're not moving. We look forward to the PE classes. We look forward to any classes that we can move around, but they're not. Oftentimes they're stuck in these classes. And so we need to get that movement. It's so important for them. And I've seen that from myself, of course, from an instructor's aspect of it. I think as an administrator, I still utilize the same practices with our warm-ups. I warm up my faculty the same idea, the same way that I did with our other classes. Maybe not as long, but I know it's important. I make sure that they're instilling their brain breaks in those classes, that maybe a health class where we're not up and moving so much, that we're giving those brain breaks. It's important that we keep on moving, that we're motivating the students in that way, that they can feel better about themselves. I just did a board presentation in November just about how our PE classes, how it's making a difference for our students with their SEL, their social emotional learning and such. And it was really an eye opener to see that PE, the movement, it really limits it. It brings down that stress level that they had. They're more confident. They feel better. They're charged more for the next class. And it's important. I know there's other schools that really they make sure those students that are having difficult times in a particular subject, math, English, whatever, they try to put a PE class before that so they can get them moving along. And that PASS class was kind of like that for all of our students. It made a big difference for me, my own students. I heard people talk about that. I tried to instill that upon my son and my daughter, and they were very good athletes. You know, my son played ball at an SEC school for baseball. I went to play for the Orioles, but you know, the same idea about centering yourself and finding out what you're all about first and moving on from there. You have to have a great foundation, and that PASS class sure gave all those students and myself a great foundation.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. Okay, what I'd like to do right now is do a screen share for everyone. Okay, can everybody see that? We're working okay? All right. So PASS was one of two major pilot projects that the American Sports Institute has developed and implemented. The other one is the Arete School pilot project. That's this, which was conducted at a small K-8 public school near Yosemite National Park in California that implemented a more intensive day-long version of the PASS program. And if anybody's interested, they can go here and click where my cursor is, Promoting Achievement in School Through Sport, to go to learn more information about the PASS program. PASS was actually called, as I mentioned before, a model for total school reform that addresses the needs of the whole learner by researchers at a division of the U.S. Department of Education. This is their report, okay? But the other pilot project that we are so excited about was the pilot project at the school near Yosemite. This is the former principal there, Evan Smith. And as I said, it was a more intensive day-long version of the PASS program. And it was throughout the whole day that all these concepts were integrated. And I'm going to scroll down here. You can see first thing every morning, the kids were getting aerobic exercise and the teachers doing the activities with the kids. And then the kids would go into the classroom where we would do school community, classroom community building activities and rituals and ceremonies. And then, as you heard from the former students and Mark, the concentration practice, the meditation that the kids did. And then we integrated physical activity with in the classroom itself, not just outside. And then we took all the concepts around the whole physical domain and we integrated them with the academic environment, okay? So the question becomes then, what was the impact of all this? Because this was the PASS program now, not just one period a day, this was the whole day. And so here you're going to hear 2 one-minute videos about the overall impact of the PASS program and then the bottom line results. So here we go.
I think the PASS program was the unifying factor that brought every component of our school community together. And without doing that, without bringing everybody together, I don't think we would have been able to achieve the success that we had. Our students felt good about themselves. They became more independent workers. They became leaders. Their health improved. Their spirits, attitudes about themselves got better. It was just a significant, highly significant part of the success that we had in our school, with all the aspects that we were able to pull together as the PASS program being the foundation of developing those things.
Okay, so that school, what we call the Yosemite School, that school went from being an underperforming school, having a lot of problems, to as you're about to hear, earning a special designation in California, including what you're about to hear, the bottom line academic results. Here we go.
And I think the thing that culminated for us was that in the, I want to say 6 years, 7 years of the program, it really helped us academically. We raised our API score, which was the Academic Performance Index, 212 points in that 6 years. And that improvement and the other things that we were doing led to Coulterville Grady School being, I should say, earning the California Distinguished School status in 2008. And that I really think was the culmination. When I spoke to the graduates at their graduation in 2008, I really stressed the fact what a wonderful time they had had since kindergarten through 8th grade via the PASS program and the different aspects of the program that we were able to bring into our entire school program.
Okay. So now what the American Sports Institute is doing is based on the successes of the 2 pilot projects. We're in the process of creating the K-12 Arete School of Sport, Culture, and Wellness. It'll be tuition-free, privately funded, open to any child in the community, including those from disadvantaged backgrounds. And given the pilot project successes and what you've heard from our panelists, both the research and real-life examples, and just like the pilot projects, the Arete School will feature a physical activity, wellness, and arts-based body-brain integrated learning methodology and curriculum that will produce, as you've heard here, students who are smart, healthy, happy, and engaged. Okay. So what are the implications of all this, of all the research studies and the programs presented here by our university and NGO panelists, with the results of the PASS program, with the results at the Yosemite School, and by what the Arete School itself will offer? And so for this, we want to talk to Ken Dyer, who's the Director of Physical Education and After-School Programs for the Delano Union School District in the southern part of Central California, about 140 miles north of Los Angeles. Ken is an outstanding educator. In fact, in 2006, as a PE teacher, he was named Teacher of the Year by the California Department of Education. So Ken, what would it mean if your district could improve its state test scores 212 points by dramatically increasing the amount of physical activity of and types of wellness practices for your students by implementing a physical activity, wellness, and arts-based body-brain integrated learning methodology and curriculum along the lines of the Arete School and the pilot projects? What would that mean for your district?
Well, thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me. And if you were looking at my camera, I'm furiously scribbling as the rest of you are talking because you're sharing such great information. So I'll tell you what it means, but I'll give you a little context. Delano sits in Kern County in California. We're on the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley. There are 58 counties in California, and of those 58, Kern County is consistently ranked 56th, 57th, or 58th in terms of all health-related data. So the chips are kind of stacked against our kids. If you had never heard of Delano, I'll give you further context. Delano was where Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and Larry Itliong started the United Farm Workers. The grape strike in the 60s started here in Delano. Gives you an idea of the makeup of our community and what we have here. So there's high levels of poverty, unemployment, and not a lot of financial resources. So what a program like this would mean to my community and what we've been working so hard in Delano to achieve is that it would solidify the idea, as many of you have expressed, that the body and brain are inextricably linked. It would mean that we're truly teaching the whole child, including adding more purposeful movement in the classroom and throughout the school day. It would mean that district leaders will buy in to more high quality PE in our schools, resulting in more funding and instructional support for hiring PE teachers, purchasing sufficient equipment, and so on. Our kids will be competitive outside of this community and contribute to the global economy. They will learn to be fit for life, regulate their own emotions, have success in other areas of their lives. And what it means is that they will have the capacity mentally and physically to live their best life. And what I've learned from being in Delano, where we don't have money, but we've added elementary PE specialists for the first time in 40 years. All of our schools have physical education, professional development, and so forth, is that it's not a matter of money. It's a matter of will. And so what we've been successful at in Delano is marketing what we do in our high quality physical education program and getting our school board and our district leaders to buy in that this is the correct course for us to follow. Many years ago, when API was still the thing during No Child Left Behind, just at my school alone, we implemented some of the things that you've all discussed today. And in 4 years, we raised our API 81 points. Now, things have changed a lot since those years, but we are moving in that direction. It means everything to a community like Delano to be able to teach these kids, not just academically, but help them grow physically and mentally.
All right, Ken, thank you so much and good luck down there. Okay, to conclude, the American Sports Institute is creating the Arete School of Sport Culture, and it's going to serve because it's based on the research and the pilot programs that we and people like David Lubens and others and Arya Sakslati have implemented. And we're taking all of this research and all of this information, and we're going to create a school that is going to serve as a model for transforming schools worldwide and be a resource and training center for educators everywhere by implementing a physical activity, wellness, and arts-based body-brain integrated learning methodology and curriculum. And the school itself, the Arete School itself, is going to serve as this model because, as we've seen, all of this can happen. It's so simple. It's so basic, and the implications of, as we've just heard, are so profound. And so the issue is we have to get the children up on their feet. And by getting them up on their feet in the learning process, this is how we go about transforming our public schools. So the message is up on our feet, returning the children's humanity to them, up on our feet, transforming our public schools. I want to thank everyone for being here today. Our panelists, you do the dedicated, the researchers, you do the dedicated, tedious, difficult research. You have to go out and raise your funds to do that. Then you have to be peer reviewed. You are heroes. In the grand ocean of knowledge, you are the relentless waves of truth that grace the shores of humanity's growth and development. You are special. For those of you like Mark and Eddie and Shannon and Jen, you are the pioneers of these programs. You were the first ones to be involved in these kinds of things. I want to thank our viewers, those of you from those of you from government, you're the government representatives from here in the United States and several other countries around the world. We hope you take what you've heard here today and use that to inform future legislation in your respective countries. I want to thank the people from the NGOs who are watching today, who are involved with similar efforts to increase physical activity, especially for children worldwide. And I want to thank the everyday viewers who are just interested in physical activity and how it impacts your lives. Finally, this is going to be recorded. We will make the recording available to everybody. For those of you who need more information or want to learn more, you can go to our website. It's with the information that I sent you with our emails and the flyer. And the last thing, and that is, depending on what time it is for you and where you are, I hope you've either gotten your physical activity today or you plan on doing it sometime after this webinar. A heartfelt and special thanks to everyone for being a part of Physical Activity and Wellness, the Body-Brain Foundation of Academic Achievement. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.